Good morning. I'm Julio Sainz along with Mauricio Riveros. Today we'll meet Mike Johansson, a professor at RIT and a social media consultant.
We hope you will be inspired.
Celebrating leaders in Rochester's unique and vibrant business community, we'll meet entrepreneurs whose passion and perseverance have helped push through life's challenges. Join us as we share their stories and journeys to success. It's time to be inspired.
Hi, Mike. Thank you very much to Be Inspired, a show that we develop to interview interesting people like you. But let's start learning who is Mike.
Yeah, I'll try and give you the Cliff Notes version. So I grew up in New Zealand, started a journalism career there, traveled, worked in an Australian newspaper for a while, traveled in Europe, got a scholarship to go to Syracuse University. And after that, started working for the Gannett Company here in Rochester, started as Sunday features editor and had a bunch of roles until about 2008 when the big downsizing of newspapers started, and switched to I now teach at RIT in the School of Communication.
Wow, what a interesting story, and it's really fascinating to see. So, Mike, if maybe we go a little bit back and tell us a little bit more about your story, that transition, be able to come to United States and move out of your country. So tell us a little bit that experience. What was that?
Well, I guess I was kind of lucky. I wasn't sort of dropped in the deep end, as it were. I didn't come straight from New Zealand. So I'd lived in Australia for a little while, worked in a newspaper there, had lived in Britain and traveled in Europe for about 6 months. It's kind of a thing a lot of New Zealanders and Australians do. It's called getting your OE, or your overseas experience. And if you're going to travel halfway around the world, you might as well make it worthwhile, right? So I think being exposed to a bunch of different cultures that way made landing in the United States on January 26th in the middle of winter at Syracuse Airport on the coldest day I'd experienced in my entire life. It literally took my breath away. That was back in the days when you had to walk from a small commuter aircraft in the open into the terminal, slipping on the ice the whole way. Yeah, it was quite the welcome to America. But I very quickly adapted, I think. I was blessed to have great classmates at Syracuse in the graduate school there. And, I sort of learned American ways of doing things pretty quickly, I think. So, and I've been here more than 30 years now. So, it was a long time ago.
Fantastic. That's a great background. I know you have so many great stories. I know you do. I've heard some. I've had the pleasure of hearing some of them. And so you were working in traditional media newspapers, and then you ended up becoming a specialist in social media and a lot of digital things, which, it's one of the reasons we have you here today to give us some, advice on social media for business owners and things. And how did you do that? How did you pull off from one of the oldest kinds of media to transitioning and reinventing yourself, as we often talk about on this show, into, social media expert?
Yeah, well, one of the things I'm always saying to students is that human beings have this natural tendency to learn. Just a question of whether we want to learn the easy way or the hard way. And in my case, I guess I was lucky that I learned a little bit about social media the easy way. The publication I was running for quite a while here in town was called Insider. And I was sort of the old guy in the room and had a really good staff of mostly 20-somethings. And they kept telling me, hey, we've got to get on this MySpace thing. This was back in, I think, 2005, 2006, because everyone's on this MySpace thing. So we got on MySpace and quickly started to get a following. And then we started thinking, well, gee, there's got to be a way we can use this to interact with people. So we decided we'd do a series of things where we would ask some of our advertisers, local business owners, bar owners and stuff, if we could have a happy hour on a Friday. And we would announce at like 1 o'clock on a Friday, hey, the Insider staff's going to be at this bar starting at 5 o'clock. Come on by. We have some giveaways, some drink specials. And the first time we did it, the bar owner went from having nobody in his place till about 8 o'clock at night to having over 200 people there by 7 o'clock at night. So he was very happy. And we learned very quickly that social media was a great way, not just to promote yourself, but to actually interact with people. We had people giving us story ideas. We had people complimenting us on our coverage. We had people, of course, telling us we were doing some things wrong, all of which was great because we're now interacting with people that we would otherwise not interact with. And so I learned very quickly, social media is just such a the social aspect of social media is really invaluable for anyone in any business. And then, of course, we moved on to Facebook. And it wasn't long after that that, I had to sort of change careers. And I decided that I knew enough about social media that I could probably help other businesses understand the value of it. So I started a consultancy in social media and started picking up a few, small business clients, medium-sized clients, eventually one very good large-sized client. And that sort of became a nice little business until teaching became a full-time thing. And then that became the side gig. So I've just sort of basically learned by doing and learned by seeing what works. And then, of course, over time interacting with others who have a lot more knowledge about the stuff than I do.
Well, this is fascinating. And what is interesting is the transition, right? So you saw that big transition, and right now we are in the middle of an incredible power that is coming in social media. You can see revolutions happening in different nations, in different places through social media. It's changing the way how society interacts. So let me ask you this question, Mike. What is the future, and how we put limits and controls, because in some point it's becoming out of control, and how we create the balance as a society, where it's so easy now that a person can post whatever they want and the truth can become so different. So what's your take on that?
Well, I mean, I think my personal theory is that control of media was basically an anomaly of the 20th century and late 19th century. In other words, the control of media then was the people who had the power basically controlled the media. So you had the power, you had the money, you could have a newspaper. You had the power, you had the money, you could have a radio station or a TV station. I think the internet has democratized communication in many ways. Literally through social media, I can reach out and talk to anybody in a position of power. They may not respond, but at least I feel like my voice could be heard. I think the idea of controlling it is a little fanciful. It's a game of whack-a-mole. I mean, for example, in the last week, lots of fairly conservative types that I have been connected to on Facebook. I have a wide range of people across the political spectrum that I stay connected to because I want a broad range of opinions. But I notice a lot of the conservative types are moving away from Facebook to a new app called Parly, P-A-R-L-Y, which is a conservative, quote unquote, free speech platform. Now, so they say they're doing this because certain posts are being taken down on Facebook or being censored, is their term, on Facebook. So you shut them down in one place, they go somewhere else. It really is a game of whack-a-mole. And I don't know that you can actually control social media. I think a far better idea would be to have better educated and more active citizen participation. In other words, when you see something that you know not to be true, instead of just shouting at the person, go find the factual information and post it as a comment. If it's something that's an out and out piece of disinformation, report it to the platform. I mean, the thing that ruins social media for me is the people who are just lazy and are not actively participating and not contributing to its value. So, or doing things like name calling or using it just to sort of, the equivalent of, if social media is the village square, some people are using it like they're the village idiot. They're throwing rotten fruit at someone, or, just dispelling what someone else is saying just for the sake of saying it. And then they're not really adding value. And that sort of undermines social media, in my opinion.
And Mike, that's a great question. Mauricio just asked you about the control, because it seems like it's out of control sometimes. And I think, I've met business people who are very afraid of what's put out there. If they have a restaurant, somebody puts up a bad review or a picture of something that doesn't look good. What's your advice for business owners? Since you do consulting on this, what's your advice to them on what can they do if somebody's saying something negative about them on Facebook or other social media?
Well, first, it's great that they know somebody's saying something negative about them. One of the biggest challenges in the early days of social media, and to some extent today, is a lot of people who just ignore social media. And that's sort of like ignoring the conversation. You don't even know when people are saying good or bad things about you. So one thing is obviously monitoring for your setting up simple things like Google Alerts to monitor for any mentions of your business or the people of your business or any of your products, that kind of thing. And then when people do say bad things, you need to engage with them. You need to be seen publicly as saying, I'm so sorry you had a bad experience. Could you please tell me more? Or what could we have done better? Being human on social media is just so important. You'll see a lot of the big brands that run social media accounts. They apologize. They very quickly try and move the conversation to the private message, in Twitter direct messages or Facebook Messenger. They try and move those conversations out of the public realm as quickly as they can. And that's really all you can do. The other thing that businesses really probably want to think about is building up goodwill on social media. The way you inoculate yourself against the few people who are trying to tear you down is to have an overwhelming amount of goodwill out there so that you don't have to defend yourself, your fans defend you. I can think of an example of a restaurant here in town. I want to say this was 2 or 3 years ago, I'm losing track now. Someone wrote a very bad review of them on Yelp. And very quickly, all these other Yelpers, in case maybe viewers don't know, Yelp is a sort of business review site. All these other Yelpers, as people on the site are called, came to this restaurant's defense and said, it must have just been a bad night. You must have just gotten, you had one bad experience. This is a really highly rated restaurant. People love it and so forth. By the time the restaurant owner found out about the bad comment, there'd been, I think, about 12 people who'd come to his defense. So that's one way of inoculating yourself against the bad review.
Thank you, Mike. We'll be back with more after these messages.
So now, analyticals and statistics are very important factors that in any platform of social media is being used. What is the level of credibility that this type of analysis, let's say you have your Facebook account and now you can see how many views you have and you can see all these other type of analysis and really they can give you more and more information. And really my question goes in terms of privacy and where you draw the line in terms of privacy and limitations and how that data can be sold to others and how that element of ethic and moral is playing in this world, because I think there's a very fine line there. And I would like to know what's your opinion about that aspect and how legislation can, I'm not trying to control things, but I'm trying to identify ways that can really protect privacy and other type of human rights.
Mm-hmm. Well, Facebook and Instagram, also owned by Facebook, are the best ad targeting platforms on social media because they collect so much data. And of course, a lot of that data is personalized to you across multiple devices that you happen to use Facebook or Instagram on. So the good news is if you're an advertiser, I ran a conference many years ago when the ad targeting on Facebook wasn't as good as it was today. And I could literally drill down by zip code to particular businesses and particular names. And it was pretty amazingly effective at a very low cost. I think there is going to be a push at some point before too long to have more anonymized data on social media. In other words, Facebook will be allowed to collect data, but it'll put you into a pool of people who are like you and say, okay, there are 100 people like Mike in this particular zip code. Would you like to reach them with an ad? Instead of there are 5 people just like Mike who are from the same place, eat at the same restaurant, go to the same gas station, go to the same supermarket. In other words, it would be a bit more anonymized and would not be attached to individual people. So I think there will be a push for that in the future. And you're right, it probably will require legislation.
How would you say the businesses in the Rochester area are doing using social media? Do you see that we're ahead of other cities or behind, or where do you see us?
Honestly, I think Rochester's all over the map. I mean, there are some that do a very good job, and there are some that should be on social and are not, or don't seem to be because they don't seem to respond to people who have legitimate questions. I think the challenge is, depending on the size of your business, you probably want to start with baby steps, and that just means basically somebody spends time monitoring and and sets up a few basic free tools for monitoring. Maybe you put a few $100s a month into a tool that helps you monitor, and then maybe you find a platform or two that you actually start investing some time on. The problem, I think, is that people look at it a bit like Mount Everest. How do you get to the top of Mount Everest? Well, it's one step at a time. You don't just go from the bottom to the top. And you really do have to invest time. And the thing with social media is it's very slow at the start. It takes a long time for the curve to get to the point where you can't just literally start on social media today and expect results next week. You have to be there. You have to let people see you are there. Let people see that you're interacting with others. Let people see you're answering questions. People see you being human.
One of the things that also is happening with the progressing and development of social media is some of the challenges and problems with people getting addicted to social media, spending a huge amount of time in social media, problems that also happen with the next generation. So how as a society we need to address that type of challenge that we will have? It's a new problem, right? It's a new level of stress. If they don't have the Wi-Fi or the connection, they get crazy, they get nervous because they are missing something, and this anxiety and other type of psychology problems. So how we deal with that aspect of this social media dimension?
Well, first you need to understand that social media platforms are designed to be addictive. They're meant to keep you on platform because the more time you spend there, the more likely it is that you will do something that makes money for them. Click on an ad, go through to a website. They're designed to be that. And so one thing is education. Starting as young as possible, you start talking to kids about, the goal of this website is to keep you there. Another thing that is a very valuable thing to think about, no matter what your age is ask yourself, what is my purpose on this particular social platform? It sounds very businesslike, but I actually have sort of a statement of purpose for every social platform I'm on. And if I ever lose sight of that, I keep reminding myself, okay, I'm on LinkedIn. Why am I on LinkedIn? I'm on LinkedIn to share social media insights, to connect with business professionals in the Rochester area, keep track of what they're up to, compliment them on their successes. But that's what I'm on LinkedIn for. How much time will I spend on LinkedIn? No more than 2 hours a week. Why am I on Twitter? I'm on Twitter because as an ex-journalist, I want news, and Twitter has become my news feed. I use lists on Twitter to follow groups of great places for getting information. But occasionally on Twitter too, I'm going to share some social media information and occasionally demonstrate my humanity, post a picture once in a while or comment on someone else's post. So having a distinct purpose on each social platform, really important. And I know you probably can't start talking to kids about that, but maybe you have conversations with kids and maybe you have conversations with yourself about, okay, keep track of how much time you're spending and ask yourself, what value did I get out of that time? I know people who spend hours a day on Facebook, for example. I don't have hours a day to spend on Facebook, and so I try very hard to limit it to very short blocks of time. And Facebook is a place where I keep in touch with people I care about all around the world.
Good. One last question, and we're almost out of time. If you could can you suggest a local or national business or company that people should look at as, just doing it pretty well, doing a pretty good job at it?
Across all social media?
Anyone in particular, just for anyone that's trying to learn more about how to do things the right way.
Well, if on Twitter, for example, I suggest people look at the accounts that do a good job interacting with their customers and having some fun doing it. So JetBlue, they occasionally have a bit of fun, but they're also very responsive. Wendy's has a very snarky Twitter account. It's a lot of fun to follow. They make fun of themselves and everyone else, which is a different approach, but it's very successful. On LinkedIn, I guess I would look at some of the things that some of the bigger companies are doing. I know, I apologize, I haven't looked in a long time, but IBM, sort of a really old company, was doing some interesting things on LinkedIn, posting things around white papers and things you could learn from them. Another company, HubSpot, on LinkedIn. They give away a lot of information for free, with the idea that if you give enough stuff away, people will come in and start paying for the really good stuff. See, I'm trying to think of who do I like on Facebook these days. I've been steering away from Facebook. I don't know that.
That's understandable.
Because the way Facebook works, if you don't interact with certain types of content, you stop seeing it altogether. So, I don't know that I can recommend anyone on Facebook right now.
Mike, really impressive. I think you have opened our eyes of what really social media means. And I think clearly there is a lot of strategies and things that companies and businesses need to think, and also individually, each person needs to really think about this new reality that is here, is there, and will gain more and more power as long, people continue to be flowing in that world. So thank you so much for all the insights that you give us, and I'm sure that in the future we will have you back here exploring and continue talking about this fascinating topic of social media. Thank you, Mike, for your time.
Coming up next week, we'll meet Daniel Dunn, a former college basketball player who's built his own business as a sports agent and as a coach.
To watch today's episode and the complete interviews of our guests, go to rochesterfirst.com/be-inspired. For more great talk with Rochester's entrepreneurs, listen to Poder 97.1, Saturdays at 9 a.m. For Mauricio Riveros, I'm Julio Saenz. We'll see you next week on Be Inspired.